Hello everyone, Happy New Year. Um, I was just finishing my breakfast. I saw this new recipe on YouTube. Super nice, very simple but super cool. And when I was drinking my coffee, I had a thought because of a discussion I had yesterday with a friend, and I was thinking empathy is a very, very important skill for programmers and engineers, right? Um, and I was thinking about it because it's something that we don't really value very much, right? When you go through coding interviews, it's one thing, but in the interview process, at least here in Berlin, and I bet everywhere, especially startups with the culture and everything, right? I bet most of them have this idea of cultural interview, like do you fit our culture? This is always a very this is always an interview that I love to do, right? I'm not very keen on doing coding sessions, especially with engineers that have their ego way above the ceiling they should have. But empathy, empathy is very important for programming. But I want to be very specific here. What I mean about empathy for programmers, I mean putting yourself in place of others, right? And when I was talking to this friend, I realized that she considers empathy something slightly different. That I think many people fall on this trap, or maybe that my idea deviates a little bit from what I consider empathy to be, and they consider empathy to be, which they think that empathy is not only you feeling the pain of the other, but also taking action towards that, take an action to solve that, right? And of course, if you go to the internet, if you are somebody who consumes this kind of content on YouTube especially, you're gonna find a bunch of places saying that you don't necessarily have to do anything, right? You just have to give attention, a place of speech for the other to speak about what they're feeling, and that should be enough empathy for some people in some cases, right? And of course, this is well understood, but for me, empathy stops on the feeling, right? You can understand that the other has a problem, that the problem derives from this. It does not involve your logical thinking of, is this really a problem or not? Should I diminish this or elevate this? Let me put my own considerations if it's serious or not. For me, it's just about understanding that the other has an issue and their reasoning for this is A, B, or C. The judgment about A, B, or C is outside of that. That's my own ego analyzing this, right? I always used to say to my friends back home that babies, when they don't have food, they suffer a lot, right? They are suffering because people like to do this comparison of suffering, right? Like, now my suffering, oh, you don't understand, especially if you are a white, straight, cis guy, right? People are gonna come to you and say, no, 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 you don't know what suffering is. You are an engineer, you have money, you live in Berlin, you are straight, you don't go to prejudice, you're not black, you don't know pain. It's like, for me, this is all valid speech, right? This is valid speech. Why? Because it doesn't matter what I think about it. What matters is that their position is this. They think this, and this generates some problem for them. So how do I connect this with programming? Mostly comes to, can you put yourself in the shoes of somebody who is to come, who will do this later, right? Who will come to this specific problem you're having and face it afterwards? Because it's so common that you see, you go through coding, and at the moment of, for example, a PR review, right? somebody is looking at it and it makes sense right then and there. When they have the card in here, they can go through the description and they see your code. And for me, super interesting are the comments sometimes people leave on the code, right? Because when you are inside the context, sometimes that comment makes sense. But does that comment make sense 1 year down the road? Can I look at it and understand what you meant here? Because if you cannot use the comment to derive context outside of the current time frame of the context of the task, the comment is largely useless, right? And I was thinking about it. Can programmers move themselves outside of a context of a problem, look at it and think, this, when somebody else comes with a different context or with no context, with different experience, with different time frame, with another task in mind, so they're coming from some other point of view, right? Trying to do something else. They're not here to read your code, right? It's not the task, hey, please read this guy's code. No, they have to do something, but to do that, they have to understand your code first. And I'm thinking this a lot because I wanted to do a short video after this one about, is there place for subjectivity in programming? Programmers are a group of people completely plagued by logic, right? Which is a shame. But if you say this in engineering circles, you are likely to be ostracized, right? Because the logic mindset takes a precedence above everything. But I'm going to save most of my thoughts for the other video, but long story short, I'm going to say most of the logics are not logic, right? People cannot understand or spot that most of the logic they use derive from their feelings that they couldn't listen to. They cannot intuit about it, right? The thing comes up, the thought comes up, and immediately is plagued by logical thinking, trying to explain, try to analyze, try to rationalize, and this is something that gets in the way of empathizing a lot, right? Especially with pressure of delivery, etc., etc. But this is another topic. So, can programmers empathize, especially with other programmers who don't care about empathy as well, right? They're going to look at your code purely logical. How do you overcome the mind that is trying to find logic where down the road they probably are not going to find none? They're just going to find code and text that makes no sense anymore. In order to get this exercise going, I have to agree that it's hard. I many times couldn't do it, but I would like to listen to what people think about it. Is this something that anyone is worried about? Is this a point of view that comes from the same direction that other people think about it? Leave your thoughts if you have any. I will be really interested in listening to them. I'm gonna finish my coffee and I'll talk to you guys soon.